Broadcasting from the Any Hour Services podcast studios, I'm your host, Mike Wilson, and on this episode of In the House, we're going to be talking about a part of your water heater called an anode rod. Let's go. In the House is a podcast about the major systems in the house: electrical, plumbing, heating, and air conditioning. Each week, I'm joined by a panel of professional people that know what they're talking about, also known as experts. We pick a topic and we discuss it in depth. It's meant to be informative and hopefully bring you some value. If you've heard the show before, thanks so much for coming back. We really appreciate you listening. If you haven't, go and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We really like to hear what you like about the show, but be careful about the things you don't like about the show. I am very sensitive. I don't want to, have my feelings hurt, so be nice. Like I said before, we are going to be talking about anode rods. And unless you are in the industry or know a plumber or have had an issue with your anode rod, I think most people are saying, a what? So that's usually the response I get. I've actually had several people ask me, hey, what's your episode about? I know your names.
All right.
I hadn't gotten to the part where I was going to introduce you yet.
All right.
But now I will. Dwayne didn't get his name said soon enough.
I got to have it.
I know, but I had this
you
flow.
were moving into a question already.
I wasn't moving into the question yet. I was still building up.
Gotcha.
But
go for the build up then, Mike.
No,
don't let me.
No, we're done.
I already derailed you.
To help us understand what an anode rod is, I'm joined by Dwayne and Scott. They're with us here today. They are plumbing. They're the plumbing managers over. I don't know what they are. They're plumbing managers at Any Hour Services. Okay, so when I say that they're here today, I'm all off the rails. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, so I'm joined by Dwayne and Scott. They're back with me today. They're plumbing managers at Any Hour Services. I'm assuming that you guys are excited to talk about this topic because you're plumbers. And I mean, are plumbers the only ones that like talking about anode rods?
I think so. I don't think it's a very common topic, but
I don't think
we sit around and talk about them all the time.
I was talking to, I think we were doing a Drains podcast, and it's just the longer we do the show, we're going to get more and more deep into topics where we just start talking about very specific parts and pieces in the home. And an anode rod, I think what I pointed out in the Drains episode was that a lot of times when we're so close to something, we don't realize that to people that don't know about this stuff, we're kind of speaking a secret language, right? Or we're speaking in code and understanding that most people don't know what an anode rod is. Let's actually just start right there. Scott, what is an anode rod for those listening that don't know? Or for those listening that might be wrong about what they think it is?
Well, so an anode rod is a component inside of a water heater whose purpose is to protect it from deterioration. It's known as a sacrificial piece, a sacrificial rod, and it is designed
Sacrifice?
What?
A sacrifice?
A sacrifice.
Oh.
Yep, a sacrificial rod inside of your tank.
But why was that?
That's what it is. It's a sacrificial rod.
That's exactly what it is. So, yeah,
it's the burnt offering of plumbing
of
parts.
the water heater.
Ironically, yeah, it's very much like that. It does
You take
break
it out,
down.
It looks like it's burnt up.
It does. It very much does. So that's what it is. It's designed to protect the water heater from the minerals and things that are in water that are corrosive and cause damage, to extend the life of it.
So whenever I go on the radio, a simple way that I try and explain it, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm oversimplifying, let me know. But I let them know, or I tell people that it was a part that was engineered specifically to attract the things that cause the tank to rust and break down, so that it takes the damage rather than the tank. And when you say it's sacrificial, it is designed to be replaced. It's what are some other, a filter doesn't last forever, right? You have to replace it. Other things around the house or in a car that you have, an oil filter, different things, they're designed to do their job, and their job is to protect the bigger picture. And for an anode rod, the bigger picture is the water heater itself, the tank, to keep it from rusting and things. And the things that attack the tank that cause it to rust will attack the anode rod. And as it goes away, if you're not checking it, if the anode rod goes away completely, there's nothing left there to attack but the tank.
That's
like
a really
that.
good, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
like
great, great
as
concept of it.
I was looking around, I came across a term that I had never heard before, but I thought it was a really good explanation. It was like a rust ulcer, but like the inside of the tank, the way they were describing it after the anode rod is like broken down or whatever, you end up with these rust spots or these ulcers inside the tank that are failure points for the water heater. So anode rod, are there any other names, or is it called something else that maybe people may have heard, or if they hear these particular terms, we know we're talking about an anode rod?
Yeah, well, let's go into a little bit more on. I'm not familiar with any other terms per se of anode rod, but what it does is it provides cathodic protection for the water heater. And
so that's a fancy science term.
Yeah. So yeah, it is. When I was going through some of the bulletins and things that are put out by some of the water heater manufacturers and things, I came across one that was very interesting, as it listed different minerals and different elements that things are made out of. And there's a hierarchy, and I didn't really realize this. I've known magnesium for a long time, just in my trade and things like that, was a very good sacrificial thing. We did a project once at the March Air Force Base down in Southern California. They added on to their VA cemetery there a large portion of it, and we had to run piping around the outside. But the soil there, because of for two reasons, the orange groves that were there for decades and a century, and then also the fact that the Air Force would go out and they take off with full wings. Back when they were training for World War II, they take off with full fuel, but they can't land those big old bombers with full fuel tanks. So they would actually circle out around, dump fuel over these fields and over the hills that were just barren at the time. Now it's all houses. But
way to go, government.
Yeah, but at the time,
the EPA didn't exist, I guess.
It didn't. I mean, they didn't think. It was all about the war,
sure.
And the war efforts. And I think we've learned a lot of things since then.
Of course.
But the soil is very, very hot, what they call hot soil. And we had to run a very large coated wire along every one of our runs and attach it to the pipe stands that come up so you can, for your little water thing. When you go to your little flower thing, when you go to the cemetery, they have spigots every so often. Well, we had to run a very thick wire, strap that onto the piping, and then every so often or in between, we had to have a magnesium brick that was a huge thing that set down in a pipe and with a chain, and they could pull that up and check how much the soil had eroded that. But it was supposed to protect the whole system from the galvanic reaction or whatever, where the hot soil would attack the galvanized piping, because a VA cemetery is going to last for a century.
Sure. So what you're explaining is that with these elements that we have, with that hierarchy, as they get attacked and deteriorate, some of them deteriorate at a faster level, or they attract things faster. And so what you're doing with the anode rod and what you were doing with your magnesium block is you put that in place so that it attacks that and not this piping infrastructure that you've put in the ground.
Correct. Yeah. So let me just kind of go down this list. It's kind of interesting. So magnesium is the lowest on the list, followed by zinc, aluminum, then steel or iron. So that's where we come into play with our water heater being steel. So anything less than that will provide cathodic protection.
Now, when you say less what?
That's, I don't know. Mike, how many elements, do you know how many elements there were in the periodic table when I went to school in college in the 70s?
I don't.
Anybody know?
Right.
That we had to memorize all that stupid stuff?
No.
Okay.
There's a reason I'm a plumber.
The only reason I got through college chemistry was I had a cousin that was
gave you the answers,
that we were in the same class, and
so he gave you the answers. I don't know what you're saying here. So how many
Yeah.
elements did you have to memorize?
So there were 105. Do you know
Okay.
how many there are today that our poor kids and those in college have to figure out today?
No, how many?
106.
118. Now, there's several that are kind of under.
Did you also have to walk to school uphill both ways,
Yes.
barefooted in the snow?
Yes, I saw the perfect meme where there's a trek of cross-country skiers going up to the top of a very sharp peak. Way up there, and that's my cousin posted that one the other day and said this was, I think, my mom and dad's story of going uphill both ways. Anyway, but along with that, I kind of went down a rabbit hole of chemistry a little bit and found out that the French and the Germans right now are very embattled in the naming process of some of these new ones. So like even though there were 105, that one still has not really been named because the French and the Germans can't figure out who gets the credit for it. And element 108 is in the same boat. The Japanese are actually developing 3 more elements they figure will make the periodic table in 2022.
What about element 115?
That one's unnamed.
Do you know what that is?
I don't.
That's the element that they
Like the
found in
sixth
the
element?
spaceship. No, at Area 51, there's like some element that makes the spaceship fly or makes this material that makes it possible. I don't know. I'm not a big enough conspiracy theorist to know everything about it, but I find it entertaining to listen to these people talk about stuff like that. And so anyway,
Element
Austin,
115.
you seem like a conspiracist. What do you know about element 115?
I just know when you said, like I've heard that before, but I feel like it's from a movie.
No, we've heard it because we listened to the Joe Rogan podcast.
Really? Is that
and
what
when
it
he
is?
had like Bob Lazar on there and they were like talking about, Area 51 and Element 115. I don't know. I'm sure it's in movies because it seems like
When-
it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when I was looking at the chart, 115 is blank.
Oh,
So it means it may have existed.
I think it's,
But
from
no
what I'm
longer
understanding,
there?
I think it's, okay, conspiracies. Here we go.
Anyway.
I think it's one of those that like we discovered something that we had not discovered yet. And so we know it exists because we've got it, but we don't know. So that's why it's blank. It's like, why does the 13th floor not appear in an elevator? Actually, it's nothing like that. But anyway, wait, what are we talking about? Anode rods?
Anode rods.
Anode rods and aliens. Anode rods and Area 51.
So anyway, I don't know. In my opinion, some of these later ones on the, the 115s
Sure.
and stuff, that's a chemical compound that only lasts for a fraction of a second when they make it. And it's like, to me, it ought to be existing. So
Sure.
let's just go with the 105s.
So I'm
and
gonna
stuff.
take what you were saying about those elements you were listing off,
Right.
Magnesium, zinc, aluminum, and then you get into the iron and the steel,
Lead, tin, nickel.
Okay, so I'm going to explain it this way. At the bottom of this list with that magnesium, those are the metals that are the easiest to, they're going to be the first ones to deteriorate. And then as you get up to iron and steel and those metals that the tank is made out of, those are also going to deteriorate. But if you can put something in the water that is going to deteriorate faster, that's that
That's the
hierarchy that you're
sacrifice.
talking
That's
about.
the sacrifice. Yeah. It was interesting as you go on down the list. The top ones are silver, graphite, gold, and plutonium. Or platinum.
the Future.
Platinum, sorry. Platinum.
I know, but you brought up plutonium.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's what the
I
that's
didn't
what
see
the
that on the
DeLorean
list.
ran off of.
Fuel.
Yeah.
It
Anyway,
was.
yeah.
Until he went to the. You did this, Dwayne. I'm sorry. Like you brought it up. You brought up Back to the Future or plutonium.
Back
and
to the
that,
Future.
that's what he. What was? Who were the people that he? You're the movie guy. Who did they get the who did he steal the plutonium from? Was it the? I don't know
The French or the Germans?
No, it was like
I don't
Russian
remember.
or Slavic people or like I don't know.
I did just Google.
115.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me what's up.
So it's real. This
I wasn't making it up.
yeah. But so it just says it was first synthesized in 2013 by a joint team of Russian and American scientists in the Joint Institute of Nuclear Research. It's a real
Element 115.
yeah, element 115. I kept reading about it. It just seems like a normal element. Like there's no that's according to Wikipedia.
So it's not related
But
to.
there is element 115 UFO alien database. I could click into that and we could really get educated.
I don't know. Guys might start knocking at the door and interrupt
Yeah.
our podcast about anode rods.
They're
and
like,
that's-
you're getting too close to the truth.
But yeah, according to
truth is out
Wikipedia,
there.
it's like its real name is I can't even pronounce it. Miscovinium or something like that.
Yep.
So,
Don't know.
there you go.
Miscommunicatividium. Okay, so
All right.
Wow. Okay.
There we go.
are we done
So,
talking about elements? Because
Well, here we go. Steel plus water
Yep.
plus oxygen
Yep.
equals rust.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I learned that leaving my dad's tools out in the yard.
And so there's we talked about there are some different types of anode rods. Maybe right now we ought to go into where they're located on the water heater possibly, and then we can.
Yeah, like if you feel like we've talked enough about things that lead up to that, let's get back
You know
into
what? One more science.
we're not done. Okay.
No, one more science fact.
Okay.
As heat increases,
Yep.
so does the process of decomposition or whatever. How many times did we sit there in the labs and you had to get out the Bunsen burner and light things up to heat things up
Oh, I've got such a
to
good story about
create
Bunsen
the
burner.
reaction?
Okay.
Let's hear it.
Well, let's wrap that up with a bow
All right.
real quick. So that is pertinent because you're heating up the water in the water heater, so things are going to break down faster. Bunsen burners. I was in high school, and we were you got the little welder striker thing to light the Bunsen burner once you turn the gas on. I don't remember if I did it on purpose. I think I might have because I thought it would be funny. But I turned the gas on and I held the striker back and I was like, I don't remember the teacher's name, but Miss So-and-so, mine's not working. And so she leans over the Bunsen burner as she's inspecting it, looking around, and I foolishly hit my striker and whew, the Bunsen burner lit up. I got written up, and on the write-up slip, she said, "He did apologize for burning my eyebrows off."
Yep, instant no eyebrows.
I can't not think of that story when people bring up Bunsen burners. I don't even remember the beakers and what we were boiling at the time, but I remember getting written up for that. And I did. I felt bad about her eyebrows. She didn't look the same after that till they grew back. Anyway, okay.
All right,
heating
Mike,
things
get us
up.
back on track.
Wow. Who would have known? Let's see. Getting back on track. Okay, so we talked about what an anode rod is, different names for it. Actually, we don't really know any other names for the anode rod. Why is the anode rod so important?
So, one of the things is when the water heaters are cast, when they're made, they've got the steel and then they put that glass lining. We've talked about that before, and every water's had it it's been their way. They've done things for decades.
Okay.
They put a glass lining on it, they heat that up, and it fuses to the metal. How they apply the glass lining in there, sometimes there's little gaps and holes, sometimes the weld joints, because they do it in the three pieces, and then the weld joint's not necessarily protected. And so
I remember on a past episode also you brought up that that heating and cooling of the water, that expansion and contraction sometimes can cause little cracks in that glass lining.
That glass. So then it wants to attack the metal that's there. And so the anode rod then is designed to attract there's always electric currents because they're again back in the chemistry, which I did very poorly in. And I can't, positives, negatives. Anyway, they're constantly exchanging ions back and forth, and it creates that electric current in there. And so the anode rod says, well, move over towards me. However that process works, which I'm not, maybe Scott.
Right.
Look at that blank stare like, dude, what'd you just do?
Right.
I felt like I'm back in high school here. Am I sleeping yet?
The way Dwayne's trying to explain it is just as confusing as my science teacher. Yeah. So I guess
Anyway.
the reason it's important is because, the engineers put it in there to extend the life of the water heater, right? So where is the anode rod in the water heater? Actually, before we do that, how long should they last? Because, we're talking about, hey, this is a dissimilar metal. It's lower down on the food chain of elements, and it's going to deteriorate, and it's designed to be sacrificed. How long should an anode rod last, or will it last?
Well, and it is going to depend obviously that's the go-to answer, but it is
All
going
the
to
time.
it's going to depend on where you live, what water content you have, whether or not you have a softener. All those things are going to play a factor into how quickly it breaks down. Your warranty or your life, not your life expectancy, but the manufacturer puts a 6-year warranty on it.
On the anode rod or on the tank?
On the tank itself.
Got
it. It's designed to protect that for the minimum 6 years. That doesn't mean it's going to last 6 years based on the
conditions.
the conditions and of where you're living and the water type.
And the manufacturers, they do this for a living, and they know exactly how long that it will last. If they had too many water heaters that were failing at 5 years, they would change it to 5 years or create a different thing to maintain the thing. And so my kind of rule of thumb that I've heard is that I was actually taking a continuing education class for licensing a few years ago, and they were talking about water heaters and from a specific manufacturer. And they said if people were to change their anode rod every 4 years and flush their water heaters every year or more, that water heater tanks would last indefinitely. And I was like, what? And I still in my notes, I made a note of it because it was like, whoa, how important is that if we were to do that, and we don't, we don't, it's kind of one of those secret hidden away things.
So if it depends and it's that important at extending the life of your system, how do you know when it's time to replace it?
Because it's on the inside, you really don't. But maintaining any appliance or anything, I love how you explained the anode rod like a filter. It's definitely something that should be checked often to see what condition it's in, because you don't know. There's not like an indicator that says, oh yeah, it's gone and we need to replace it. It's something that should be checked. It should be balanced. Your whole water heater flushed out.
Boy, what an upgrade that would be if a water heater manufacturer decided to figure out some type of indication of like when the anode rod had deteriorated.
Goes right to your phone.
Oh, Wi-Fi.
Alert. Yeah, that's an interesting concept.
Your anode rod
or why don't we just develop them out of platinum or,
because of the cost.
Plutonium.
We're trying to drive the cost of water heaters down. Okay, so all right, so you brought up like essentially what I got out of what you just said is the only way to know when it's time to replace it is you got to be checking it. And so that leads us to your question, Dwayne, about like where they're located. So let's talk about how we go through the process of checking it, where to look for it, different things like that.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah, happy to handle that one. So there's basically 3 manufacturers of water heaters. One of them has the anode rod. I don't know if we want to do brand name on the nipple that goes down, the pipe that goes down. So where the cold water feed or the hot water feed comes out of the water heater, there's an anode rod that goes down that's attached to that piece of that pipe that's coming out of the top of the water heater.
Is it part of the hot water or cold water?
It's on the hot water side.
So it's part of the hot water outlet, nipple pipe that like goes.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the water all comes out of the top, and so they have a connector in there that has some holes that come in from the side and then from both sides, and then allow the water to flow up through it. It would be interesting to see, if you could see it, how kind of small those holes are sometimes that the water goes through. It's like, wow, we got a 3/4 inch pipe. Can those holes really flow that much water? So it is kind of a flow restrictor, a little bit of a limiter, I think, on that, but it's also engineered and designed and been doing the same thing for a long time, so it must work. And there again, we go off into physics now. And
where are the other 2 locations you were talking about?
Yeah, so then another type have the anode rod just built in off to the side. So you've got your hot and cold water, and usually at the back where the water heater's facing, there's another hole there, and there's a hex nut down in there that's about an inch sized hex nut
It's 1 and 1/16.
It's 1 and 1/16. Yep, you had to go there. Exactly, it is.
Well, there's not very many things that are standard across, and like I, from the research and stuff that I'd done, that seems to be a pretty standard like size part. Like
they do
inch
keep
and a
that
16.
consistent.
Yeah.
Yep, they do keep that consistent.
That was nice of them.
Thankfully, yeah. I mean, who'd want to carry a whole impact set for all the different things and stuff? But anyway, so it's there at the back. There's a hex nut. Sometimes there's some insulation over the top of it, and it's a little hard to see. Some of them have a little plastic cap that they put on just as a protection or to hide it.
Sure.
Maybe it's to hide it. I don't know. Just for aesthetics and make it look cleaner, that kind of a thing. So that you see those multiple variations. But so with the hex nut one, you can grab an impact wrench or a large cheater bar with that 1 and 1/16 socket, and you can stick down in there. You might need to take a screwdriver and clean it up a little bit, but you can put that impact wrench on there and an impact, or there again, the large cheater bar. If you ever do go to inspect it on a water heater with the cheater bar, you definitely do not want to drain the water heater because they are really, really torqued.
So if we talk about the process, step one, shut the water, shut the fuel supply off to the water heater, locate where the anode rod is. We talked about the different locations. The one that you're going to most easily be able to check is the kind where there is a hex nut, on top. And really, if you don't see a hex nut on top, it is possible. There are a few where you have to like remove the screws on the side and kind of lift that cover plate up and kind of dig around the insulation and see if you can find it there. And then those are the ones that you're going to probably most likely be able to check yourself. The other one, if you're having to disconnect with the nipple and things like that, you're going to want to.
You'll have a pipe wrench. You need a pipe wrench to be able to start unscrewing that. And they talk about then when you want to check it, you don't need to pull it all the way out. You just lift it up and inspect it, and it's going to start from both ends. So it's going to start from the top and start from the bottom typically, and erode quicker on those ends. And so one manufacturer says if it's more than 6 inches on either end, then maybe you ought to think about replacing the anode rod. To describe it, the anode rods are about 40 inches, somewhere between 40 and 48 inches long. Under that 1 and 1/16 hex nut, there's a rod coming straight down, and there's a metal annealing. Oh, anyway, when they build these things, they stick it in the metal, and then they stick it into a certain chemistry of water, and then it attracts the minerals there that it needs to build, and the magnesium builds on it. And there again, that's a whole science project of plating, and that I don't know how that works, but it bonds and connects all together. And so it's about almost an inch round rod that comes down, between a 1/2 inch and inch round rod that comes down in, that then gets attacked by the calcium and magnesium and chemicals.
So once you locate the hex nut, like Dwayne was saying, more than likely it's going to be super tight, into the water heater, especially if you've never checked it and things before. The older your water heater is, the harder it's going to be to break this thing free. Drain a couple gallons out of the water heater, leave as much water as you can, not because that's part of the draining process, but because, like Dwayne said, the thing is so locked in there, you want as much weight.
50 gallons at 8.3 gallons per minute is a lot of weight that's holding that down and keeping it from turning as you're trying to torque on that.
So once you do that and you break it free, you lift it up. Let's talk about what people are going to see and what they're actually looking for. So, because in my mind, there's two main things that people are going to be looking for with that. Well, three, I guess. One, you lift it up and the anode rod is still there and it looks like a metal rod. You're probably okay. But what are the two other most common things that people are going to find? One of them is if it's gone, if it's eaten away, right? So it's really thin, it's pitted, it looks like it's been eaten away at. That's one. And the other one is if it is encased in like hard water or calcium, that kind of encasing. Because when it does that, your anode rod may still be intact, but you're not getting the reaction that you need.
Can't get through all those barnacles and whatever they're built up on the outside of it.
And for those watching on YouTube, we're going to put on the screen some different anode rods so that you can see what those things look like and the different, whatever. Austin, if you'll make that happen after the fact. Let's see. So if you find it's encased in calcium or it has been eaten away, and you'll see different levels of deterioration if you're watching on the video. But let's say, like for the calcium, if it's just encased, can you take it out and knock that stuff off and put it back in? Or do both of those require replacing the rod?
Yesterday I was messing around with one, trying to pull one out of one of our water heaters in the boneyard, and I could not get it. There was a big chunk. About 3 inches round. I could feel it and look and see down in there, but I could not get it to break to pull out the anode rod.
Gotcha.
So I guess at that point you could just cut it.
Yeah,
and leave it down in the bottom and then replace it.
Well, not only that, but some because a 40-inch rod that you're trying to feed in from the top, a lot of water heaters are in basements or equipment rooms. They may not have 40 inches of head space.
8-foot ceiling, 5-foot tall water heater, and you've only got 3 feet and it's 4 feet long.
Right. And so that's the thing. If you're going to replace the thing, now when you go to do it, like I've always heard that you could like take it out in sections. If you come to a section where it won't come out any further past the thing, then yes, you can let it like drop down into the tank. But which brings you to the point, if you can't get it out because there's not enough headroom, what do you do to put a new one in?
Yeah, the cool thing is they make them in small sections, so just small pieces where you have multiple links, almost like a sausage link.
Yeah, there you go, sausage link.
Those are an easy way to replace that way.
We got to stop recording these so close to lunchtime and making food analogies.
Yeah, I mean,
sausage. Where could we get some good sausage links?
I think a good
I don't think there's
kolache would be.
What's your favorite store-bought sausage? If you do not have an answer off the top of your head, you do not love sausage enough.
I apparently don't love it enough.
It's whatever's the cheapest if I go and buy them.
No, you can't go cheap.
Like sausage is one of the. I like Jimmy Dean. I love the flavor profiles that they have there. I've tried different sausages because they look so good, right? I'm like, ooh, that one looks like it's got a lot of flavor.
But do you go with the brown and serve, or do you go with the actual put the steam on, simmer them?
Well, that method of cooking,
process.
I don't usually. Well, I mean, I think of that as like a brat, which I guess is a sausage, and I don't usually steam them in like a pot of beer or water or whatever. I usually put them on the grill, low and slow. I like to smoke them, and then put them on a bun with some coleslaw on top and a homemade like barbecue sauce. That's my choice.
I am hungry now.
We got to go to lunch after.
Anode rods. What? Sausage. Okay, so
links.
That's right. So so if you don't have a lot of headspace above your water heater, this anode rod, and we'll put a picture up on the video if you're watching, of this metal rod that's broken into pieces. Looks like nunchucks, kind of like little bitty nunchucks, and you feed it down in so you can get that angle to get that anode rod in there. Okay, so after you get the anode rod back in, what do you do next?
You're there, and make sure you install it properly. Don't cross thread, because if there's deterioration on the anode rod, there's very likely deterioration on the threading. So be careful when you put it back in that you're getting it threaded together properly and use the proper sealants.
What is the proper sealants? Do you just Teflon tape? Do you use
pipe dope? Yeah, combination of the two.
How much Teflon tape should you use? Because like it's one of those things where when I'm like doing little plumbing projects around the house and I get going on the Teflon tape, it gets fun to get carried away with the Teflon tape.
Yeah.
But like, what's the right amount? Is there too much?
Yes.
Oh.
And it depends on the brand too. Because there's thicker Teflon and thinner Teflon.
How does someone know when they've used the right amount of Teflon tape?
It's usually about 4 wraps. That's kind of the general consensus on smaller pipes. On larger pipe, if you're doing 2-inch or something, we usually put a few more wraps than that, just because the fittings are not as tight fitting, I guess, and stuff. But
Gotcha. Okay, so tighten that down. Is there, like, do you have to worry about if this thing was so tight that you're having to like work really hard to break it free? Do you need to like torque that thing down as hard as you can? Do you need to have a torque wrench? Like, what's the proper method to tighten that thing down?
That's always a tough answer because it really is a feel. Like anything, like a mechanic just
Depends on
knows.
how strong you are.
Right. It really does. Like I can't tell you exactly
I have to be really careful because if I was to tighten it down as hard as I can, I mean,
might break it.
Exactly. The tank would crack.
Yeah.
Like we'd have a whole different issue.
Yeah.
The anode rod would be the least of our worries.
Yeah.
these cannons can really tighten, even though I'm old, there's still some strength in those things.
Watch out. Dwayne's going to throw hands on you. Come up talking crap about anode rods. He'd be like, I got you.
Yeah, we got that.
Okay. Let's see.
Afterwards, after you're all done, obviously you would want to pressurize it, and then because it's because it's right there, and now you can see the joint and everything, you would want to just kind of run your finger down in there, possibly look and see if there's any moisture coming out of it at all.
I like to take a paper towel. I like to dry around the fittings as
idea.
much as possible, and then I'll take a dry paper towel and put around those fittings, and then once the water comes back on, because it's hard sometimes to see like a little bitty drip or whatever, and so I'll turn it on. I'll actually leave the paper towel on there for a couple of days. I'll come back just to make sure that it wasn't like a super slow leak or something like that to see if you can see the water.
Just be careful on that you don't leave a big rooster tail of paper towel sticking out towards the flue.
Okay.
On that, you'd want to just kind of a tight fit down around it.
That's a good point. I got
flammable material.
We did an episode on smoke detectors. Like
there we go. That covers it. That covers it.
Okay, so let's see. Talked about that. Okay, so let's talk about. Let's say someone isn't comfortable doing that themselves, or they can't get the thing broken free. Is that a service like? Do people call up a plumber and say, "Hey, I want you to come and check my anode rod," or is it part of a water heater inspection? How does someone get this service done?
We, there are people that do call in and say, "Hey," because they hear something like our podcast, and now suddenly, wait, what is an anode?
I didn't know about it. I've never checked it. My water heater's 15 years old.
Yeah, and so one thing I wanted to talk about is, if it's just down to the wire, or nothing's there, you're probably past trying to be able to protect the water heater. It probably is just done because it has already started.
Been attacking the tank.
The rust is already developing, and once rust starts, it's about impossible to stop it.
Is there a way to check that? Like if it's like, because I'm sitting here thinking like,
you pull it, or you have a camera inspection you can stick down in there.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
Gotcha.
And it's just not something.
Or the app that you're going to create that tells you how.
Well, have you seen those little cameras that like plug into the port at the bottom of your phone, and they have a little LED light on the end, and you can like stick it down. It's a pencil. This the size of a number 2 pencil, flexible. I would think. I might get one of those and like go out to our boneyard.
That would be kind of
check
fun
the
to
water
see.
heaters.
Yeah, you could actually pull the TMP off and then just go right through the side of the water heater, and you can inspect that whole anode rod.
Look and see.
I'm just thinking like if you just got finished pulling the anode rod out, actually it might be hard to like hold the anode rod up and fish the thing down. Maybe the TMP is a better place to go in. I'm going to do that. I'm going to get one of those cameras and go out to the boneyard and see where it's easier to like inspect the inside of those and see what the inside, because that's an interesting way to do it. Because I've thought I want to go out there and just cut a bunch of them open, like to show the different things that are inside. But I'm curious how. I'm going to do that. I'm going to experiment. I'm going to check it with the camera, see if I can see signs of rust, and then to verify, I'll cut them open. We don't recommend you cut yours open at home. That's a guaranteed replacement.
Yeah.
Document the age of them if you can, and see how that works. So
there we go. Science experiment.
But I think, if we were to pay more attention to them, and yes, our some of our tune-up technicians do go out and they inspect regularly. It can't be 100% because some of them you just cannot break free. I mean, they'll get a big cheater bar. They're in there so
well,
tight.
if you can't break it free, and it's a really old water heater, and you're seeing signs of rust other places, there's a good chance that the thing is kind of not welded, but like, I mean, it's all mangled and more than likely your water heater's on the verge of failure there.
It's just done. We, can talk a little bit about how do you extend the life of them as far as
an anode rod?
Of an anode rod, or how we extend the life of the tank. So we have sometimes we can do an extended warranty that the manufacturers offer, and that is often comes with a kit that has a second anode rod that we'll put in the brand new water heater. So there's the one existing at the back, and then there's a kit that we have that we can put in there that has a second anode rod, and that will give you that 10-year protection. And it goes in where the hot nipple goes in, where the hot water comes out. And they're about 3 feet long instead of the 4 feet, or 30 inches long instead of the 40 inches. And
that comes with each water heater?
It's an option for us. It's an option that people can add on. Our guys carry that kit on their truck, and then they slap a label on there that says 10-year tank. And so you're basically giving about 75% more anode rod. So if they figure that the water heater, the original one's going to last 4 years before it starts to deteriorate or attack the water heater, then by adding that 75%, now we're hitting that 7-year spot before it starts attacking the metal, and that's why they can do the 10 years.
Is there anything when you're installing the original anode rod? Is it part of the tank, or does it come separate and the plumber puts it in?
It's there.
It's there already?
Yeah, it's installed at manufacturing.
Got it.
They've really engineered those things in to be the best possible product, the largest thing that they can do to at least meet, when we talked about this in another disposable society session, as far as how long they want to make them last and things. But they've got some really good materials that cover a broad, throughout the United States, Scott mentioned it earlier, there's all different types of water conditions. And so they've created the right mix and the right sizes and things to help protect 97% of the water heaters for that time frame.
I do want to bring up, because we talked about it a little before the show, and I remembered, I was surprised to hear this when I originally heard it years ago, but that water softeners, the process of that soft water, or the chemical makeup of that soft water, actually speeds up the deterioration of an anode rod, right?
It's true.
Because
it is true.
It surprised me, because I hear us talk so much about the importance of having soft water in the home because of the damage that the hard water can do. And I just assumed that, like, a soft water will extend the life of your water heater as well. But in reality, it might minimize the sediment, buildup, or not the sediment buildup, but the hard water buildup inside.
Magnesium.
But it will deteriorate the anode rod faster, which is nothing. Again, it's a sacrificial part. It's designed to be replaced. But if you have a soft water system, if you have a water softener, you just need to be more aware of that and make sure that when you're having your periodic plumbing inspections done, which I don't think most people, do that unless they're on some type of home maintenance plan where it's like part of it. But it is something that you should check periodically, and then just be really diligent about checking the anode rod if you have a soft water softener. Do they have some type of anode rod in a tankless? I'm assuming no, because you're not storing water in a tank.
That's correct.
Got it.
Yeah. And the tanklesses today, they're all stainless steel. And so the stainless steel is, does not rust as like iron does.
Got it.
Thanks.
What else do you want people to know about anode rods? Any final thoughts?
I just want to mention with the soft water,
Yep.
just so there's not too much confusion on there. There's a give and take with anything. The benefit of soft water versus the attack on the anode rod, the benefit way outweighs the con of it attacking. And it's not the soft water that's attacking it. It's the salt content that's added into soft water.
Yeah.
So
no, yeah, and I don't bring that up to try and say don't get a water softener. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that if you have one,
Yeah,
just understand that with those benefits, there is a trade-off, and
Right.
you need to watch out for that.
That soft water protects the inside of your pipes.
Sure.
It protects your faucets, and so instead of having to change faucets because they're so calcified and won't move every 4 or 5 years, then it is a trade-off and things like that. Faucets should last 20 years, kind of a thing. So
Yep.
Well, and it also helps us understand that maintaining it is what's going to prolong it. So having a water softener and understanding that it's going to attack that anode rod, doing proper maintenance on that every 6 months to a year is going to prolong the life of it.
Yeah. Dwayne's point about like the tank will last indefinite. I mean, those things are not quite bulletproof, but I mean, they're a big, huge piece of heavy gauge steel that if you are maintaining the parts that were engineered, to protect it, that's the thing that is, as long as the tank doesn't fail, all the other parts and components on it can be replaced. And why just let your water heater deteriorate to the point that you have to replace it? I mean, if you got that kind of money, cool.
yeah.
Mazel tov, spend it how you want to. But if you're about saving that money, like, maintenance is the way is the least expensive way to prolong the life of any piece of equipment.
Absolutely.
And the thing that's funny about maintenance is that you don't usually see the benefit of it when you maintain it. The benefit comes at the end of it, where you're not having to spend, another, however much, $1,000 to replace the water heater, $2,000, whatever.
We do
size.
it with our cars. I mean,
Right.
How do you get more than 100,000 miles? You maintain it.
Cross your fingers.
Well, yeah, you can, but I got it.
Speaking of cars, and no, I'm not. That's a story for another time. Anything else about? We have sufficiently derailed this episode plenty of times. Anything else from you guys?
I think we're good. Scott and I were going to battle about something, but I forgot what it was, and it didn't go there. So
We'll have to
actually
save it
going to
for
have to
another
take
day.
off the headphones.
Yeah, you guys were
Yeah.
super upset with each other. We had to break you up before the show. I was.
But we've kissed and made up now. No, sorry. High fived, fist bump.
All right, that's the show. We'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode of In the House. We'll actually be talking about why air conditioners freeze up. So have you guys ever had an air conditioner freeze up?
Yes.
Had that block of ice?
Yep.
How bad?
To where it stopped working.
Yeah, but I mean, was it the just ice forming on the inside or on the outside?
Just on the inside
Just
on
the
mine.
inside.
Yeah, inside
I
on
think-
mine too.
Yeah, and I think I went downstairs and noticed ice starting to form one time. Anyway, so if you're curious about how to keep that from happening, tune in next week. Don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you get notified every time we release a new episode. I'd like to thank everyone that helps make the show possible, my guests, producers, everyone behind the scenes. If you haven't, go and leave us a review. Remember to be nice, but we'd really appreciate it to hear what you think about the show. If you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, visit anyhourservices.com or find us at Any Hour Services on any of the social platforms if that's how you want to find us. I've been your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to In the House. See ya.